Hi guys, it's Lisa Dante again, therapist in Central Florida, licensed mental health counselor, working in the Central Florida area for quite some time. I won't tell you the years because that would date me a little bit. There were the birds again. Um, Wanted to take a minute today, or a few, to pick up kind of where we left off, talking about transitions and all that can bring to us, the challenges with that. Yesterday, when we talked, I used the analogy of the transition phase of labor when a woman is giving birth to a new baby. One of the things that I said as part of that is when a woman is in transition, she's probably going to feel the urge to push that baby right on out. But she might hear the doctor, the doula, or the midwife say, not right now, it's too soon. Don't push yet. That's not something a woman in labor really wants to hear. And it's at that point that she is encouraged to just breathe. Breathe at a time when that is really the last thing that she wants to do. She wants to make some effort to get this thing over with. Well, when we are in similar circumstances with life, to not walk through the whatever it is that we're walking through, and we want to push and we want to make something happen, it's usually at that point that we stir up trouble for ourselves and create unnecessary crisis. Whether it's through the creative genius of getting into a different relationship, or going out and relapsing with drugs or alcohol, or quitting a job, picking up and moving to another state. There's so much chaos that we can create for ourselves creatively under the guise of, I want to push through this and make this feeling be over with sooner rather than later. So, sitting with the transition, being in it while it's happening, breathing while it's happening, not always the easiest thing to do. And so, like I said yesterday, it's really helpful when we have people with us to hold our hand and to stand with us during that time. And I touched on, what if you don't have somebody to stand with you, to hold your hand? What do? What do you hold on to? And I had said, that's when you dig deep, right? Well, where do you dig deep to? That's a good question. Where do you go? For those of us who have been brought up in a faith tradition, that may be a little bit easier. For people who have not, where do they go? What do they do? So I'd said in my first conversation that I would touch on faith, and I'd give you a little bit of an idea of what my spiritual beliefs are, so you get some sort of framework of who I am and where I'm coming from. So let's go there for a second. I was brought up in a Southern Baptist tradition, not a strict Southern Baptist family, but certainly I had a mother with very strong religious convictions in terms of belief in the Southern Baptist version of God. And so from that, I had a lot of teaching on the Bible, those Bible drills, got to remember those scriptures. But it was really my mother's influence and her interpretation of those Bible verses at home that really stuck. And the Bible verse that stuck the most with me was, for those of you who are familiar with the Christian Bible, the verse is from Romans 8:28. And that verse says something along the lines of, again, there are different translations, so the one that I learned was, all things work to the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And I can distinctly remember having the conversation with my mother and asking her what that really meant to her. And what she said to me stuck. And that was, well, I believe that it means that whatever happens to us, whatever we are going through, can be used for good if we allow it to be. Basically, she said, God can use whatever happens to us in life for good if we allow Him to use us in that way. That was an interesting concept. And it's one that really laid a very strong foundation for how I coped with anything that came up in my life from that point forward. Because in my little brain, if anything bad happened, I knew that if I was just able to have a little bit of faith, that at some point my life experience could be used for the good or betterment of someone else. Obviously, at that point, I had no idea I would end up being a counselor, but that one conversation with my mother had a huge impact on me. Okay, so part of my faith background was Southern Baptist, Christian focused. That evolved into, as a high school student, moving to a different denomination that was a lot more liberal. And they had the perspective and taught or encouraged me to read the Bible on my own and to see what I felt led to, and to see what I thought, again in Christian tradition, what the Holy Spirit was teaching me and wanted me to learn for personal growth and development, what lessons I needed to learn. Now, these were not the same words that were used in the pulpit on Sunday morning, but that's what I got out of it. Again, I was probably 18 years old, in my early 20s, in college, and that's the message that I took. And so I started exploring my own spirituality in a different kind of way, again, using the Christian Bible as a frame of reference. And I found a lot of meaning in that, because I started seeing that I was interpreting things in a different kind of way. And I felt like I was learning a lot more, and I was also approaching it from a deep spiritual perspective. Okay, let's move on in time. I stayed in the Christian tradition, raising my children, my first son, in a different denomination. Denomination doesn't matter, middle of the road, very laid back kind of Christian church. And it was during that time, in the early part of my career, that I was exposed to the 12 steps through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in my very first job, was encouraged to practice what I preached. And so from that perspective, I started attending 12-step meetings and really started paying attention to what those 12 steps were all about. I learned that there's a surface component to the 12 steps. And then if you want to, if you allow yourself to, you can take those to a much deeper level and have some tremendous spiritual growth, if you will, as they say, practice these principles in all of our affairs. So I started looking at how to apply spirituality to day-to-day life in a more specific kind of way. I also, through their phrasing, started exploring God as I understand Him. And I started asking myself, well, what do I exactly understand God to be? Because at that point, I knew that I felt very strongly that God was a lot more than some guy with a long gray beard and a white gown sitting on a cloud somewhere. The images from my childhood, right? And I had been to graduate school, and I had been exposed to the concept of the collective unconscious, an expansive universe. And those two kind of blended together for me. And so that my concept of God really grew exponentially. God as I understood Him turned into this amazing, for me, amazing awareness that God was all in all, which kind of fit in line along with Native American teachings of God being a part of every living thing, making every living thing sacred. The trees, the plants, animals, the earth, the sky, everything. It all fits together, the universe. And so if every living thing is sacred, then so are we. And if every living thing has energy, then so do we. And if every living thing has energy, then we're all connected. And we too are part of that collective unconscious, a part of that great universe, a part of the great I am that has no name for me. Whether you call that, or for myself, whether I call it God, the universe, higher power, doesn't really matter to me. I know what I'm thinking when I think it. So for me, everything is all connected. I'm going to digress a little bit because I kind of do that. Do you guys remember that movie called The Butterfly Effect? And I'm not going to go into detail because I'll probably get it all wrong, but basically the inference is one thing affects another. So if a butterfly bats its wings, flaps its wings over here, that it's going to create a hurricane across the planet, some such nonsense as that. Or is it nonsense? Because we do affect one another, and our energy impacts one another. And we all matter. In that regard, we all matter. We do. And our energy matters. And so, during this time of transition, when things are hard for a lot of us, things are hard. This time spent in social isolation, where we're spending more time with one another at home, when our usual coping skills of going to the movies, going out to eat, going to play, our diversions to take us away from the day-to-day aren't there, things become heightened, tensions grow greater at home. And so, I don't know about you guys, but my energy can be a little off. My energy can be way off. It's harder sometimes to bring myself back to my center and to my core. And I've been finding myself spending a lot more time outside as a result, because it's helping. But if my energy impacts your energy, then during this transition, it is incumbent upon all of us to take some time to do some self-care, to bring our energy into a happier place, a more peaceful place, a more connected place, a more reverent place, a more honoring place, honoring to the earth and honoring to one another, respecting one another's differences in belief and faith, whatever that may be, respecting one another's differences in all matter of things, because we are all connected, and respect is really where it begins. Respect me for my beliefs, no matter how silly they may seem to you, and I will meet you where you are. Yep, I know that people have called me a little hippy-dippy, Okay, so I will respect you. Please respect me. Let's do that for one another, because in this hour on this planet, we need to be here for one another now more than ever. We are called to learn how to rise above with one another and for one another, and we can do it. Transition, faith. So look to whatever your source of faith is. Find that one thing within your faith that encourages you to keep going, to be your best self, to rise above, to remember who you are within the grand scheme of things on this planet. And step up. Step up for yourself and step up for one another. Because yes, all of this is going to be over at some point. At some point it's going to be over. And this too can be used for good if we allow it to be. If we allow ourselves to be used as tools for the betterment of this planet and mankind, we can do it. I believe in you. I know you can do it. I know we can do it. You guys have a good day. I look forward to hearing from you. Take care.